हो सकता है और उसके बाद असेंबली या गवर्नमेंट को रिस्टोर भी किया जा सकता है।
तो सुनवाई के दौरान जो कोर्ट टिप्पणियां रही हैं उसको देखते उसके मद्देनजर आपको क्या लगता है कि क्या कुछ लीगल तौर पर वो खामियां?
All right, Majid Memon is also now joining us with his perspective into this case. Now, sir, you are seeing that President's rule has been set aside by the Uttarakhand High Court. The Congress is claiming it to be a victory for the democracy. Clearly, it's a shot in the arm for the Congress party. But politically, how are you observing this entire development in Uttarakhand?
No, both legally as well as politically, it's a day to celebrate because the day when there was imposition of President's rule in Uttarakhand, we had raised our voice and we had pointed out that this is nothing but strangulation of democratic principles and total violation of values of constitutional values. And then, of course, today the day has come, and even a couple of days before, we have seen yesterday, the Uttarakhand court was aghast on the role of the President of India. That President is also subject to error, and President is also has to act within the constitutional framework.
Yes.
And that was enough indication that the President's rule would be quashed. Now today, this has happened. In fact, I heard Mr. Subramaniam Swamy on another channel saying that we are going to Supreme Court in S.R. Bommai. See, S.R. Bommai's case was available to the present cabinet.
Yes,
they
absolutely.
ought to have, and they had some certain legal luminaries within the cabinet. Why did they not examine that S.R. Bommai in terms makes it clear that no democratically elected government can be thrown out unless it is reduced into majority, and the test it is reduced into minority, and the test of majority or minority can only be only happen on the floor of the house. Now here, Uttarakhand court had ordered the test of the numbers on the floor of the house. The government overturned that order by rushing to hold a cabinet meeting and ill-advising the president to resort to Article 356. But this is a humiliating defeat for NDA, and I am afraid that it's a shame for the entire cabinet that such a thing could happen. In spite of Bombay judgment and the guidelines that were there, they have flouted it, and therefore it's a day when NDA government will reconsider how it could continue enjoy the people's mandate.
Okay, Mr. Majid Memon, thanks for joining us with your views on that. Let me go across now to Deputy Editor Brijesh Pandey joining us from outside the Uttarakhand High Court. Brijesh, can you fill us in with some more details that you've picked up as far as this judgment is concerned?
Well, Baha, one of the very important things which we have been talking about for a while now and asking about for a while now is the fate of those 9 rebel MLAs. Now, the interesting thing is that on 23rd, which is the day after tomorrow, the case which is particularly catering to this, the status of 9 rebel MLAs will come up. So after this judgment, it will be extremely interesting. And apart from that, the High Court has also made an observation which is very stinging as far as these 9 rebel MLAs are concerned, and it has gone to the effect of saying that that these 9 rebel MLAs will have to face their fate because of the constitutional sin which they have committed. There's one more thing which I would like to tell you, Maha, is because you have to understand that this fate has been brought upon by the central government itself. The judges were not at all keen to pass an order today. They were not even interested in passing an interim order today. Judge Bisht, who was the brother judge of the Chief Justice, he has said 2 or 3 times that that we will need time to deliberate upon it. But can you give an assurance? Can the center give us an assurance that the status quo would not be violated? They asked for this yesterday, they asked for it today, but when the center, when the ASG refused to give him any kind of assurance, yesterday the Chief Justice said that, don't provoke us. Today he says that, I'm extremely saddened by the approach. They went for a 5-minute break, came out and started, dictating the order. So a lot of it has also been brought upon by the center themselves. Now what we are getting to hear is that the center is likely to approach a Supreme Court for stay on this order. When exactly will happen, we'll get to know in a while now. Maha?
Also, Brijesh, as we have been discussing, that this order now, after the S.R. Bommai order, opens even the President's assent to judicial review.
But you know, I mean, more than that, I would say that the Attorney General or most of the the advocates who were appearing on behalf of Centre were kind of clutching at straws. You know, I mean, the Bobai judgment had made it extremely clear. And if you look at the kind of 3 days of hearing which I have been witnessing, you know, the Centre had come in for severe flack. You know, the judges even went on to the extent of telling the Attorney General that, you know, by doing this, the Centre is trying to introduce chaos. The judges could not be more disparaging and stinging than this. And there were several other remark, you know, when the Attorney General tried to take refuge under this thing that the action of the President cannot be questioned. He said that, you know, even if it is a king, I mean, his judgment or anybody's judgment is to be reviewed. So what they have done is that they reinforced the judgment which we saw in Bomai or Rameshwaram cases once again by making it very clear that irrespective of the kind of argument which has been given by the Centre in support for imposition of President rule, which is the allegation of horse trading or the Singh CD, which purportedly shows the then Chief Minister Harish Rawat indulging in buying and selling of the legislators. So they made it very clear for the one place where all this can be put to test is the floor of the House and nowhere else. And until unless the judgment, the central government has very, very convincing proofs that the President rule can be imposed, only then it can be done. Baha?
Javed, I want to come back to you on the point that Brijesh has also made, that the court very clearly underlines that the President takes a call only on the recommendation of the cabinet, and therefore this judgment is then a huge embarrassment to the Centre.
Well, certainly, absolutely, without doubt, and Brijesh is spot on when he says that. And some very significant news points brought out by Brijesh. One, that the entire battery, the legal might of the Government of India was pitched in as far as this Uttarakhand case was concerned. They had the Attorney General, they had Mr. Mukul Rohatgi, all his other colleagues, and then as a last resort, they flew in Mr. Harish Salve. The whole world knows that now Mr. Harish Salve spends more time practicing in England and less in India, yet his services were requestioned. They were so desperate, that desperate, to try and ensure, to see that the validity of, that a judgment, validity of their decision was upheld, which was not. And then the court has now brought into question, not just upheld the guidelines laid down in the SR Bomai judgment, but also upheld its supremacy and its right to even call into question decisions taken on the aid and advice of the cabinet by the President of India. This is not a censure of the President of India. His role is very limited in this because, you know, the President of India can at best send it back. In this case, Mr. Pranab Mukherjee asked for queries when the first cabinet decision was moved, when it was first sent to him. At 9:30 that night, Mr. Arun Jaitley, who's supposed to be the legal brain of this government, he went and met the President. And after that, the President had no recourse but to sign on the dotted line. So if there is a censure, the censure is that of the central government. And the central government cannot escape embarrassment or responsibility for the mess that it finds itself in today.
Vinay, I want to come back to you now. Uttarakhand High Court has, as Brijesh is pointing out, slammed the Centre, saying, and Brijesh just pointed this out, that you're introducing chaos and undermining elected governments just before the second half of the budget session starts in Parliament. This is a serious trouble for the Centre.
Yes, and I think what Javed and Brijesh was very, very right. What it actually brings out is that the entire legal defense team of the government will come under a bit of a question mark. Remember, in this particular case, there are three big problems, completely needless problems that the Centre now faces itself with. Number one, it's very clear they have been out-argued in a court of law. So there has been a legalistic defeat for the government in a court, and a very high-profile one where they've put the entire might against the Congress's legal might, and they've been clearly out-argued because the court has lock, stock and barrel bought the argument of the Congress party in the court. Number one. Number two, they've dragged the President's office in a very needless controversy.
Yes.
As Javed was saying, he had no option but to sign on the dotted line because it was returned. The fact remains the office got dragged into something which frankly was not required at this point of time. Mr. Pranab Mukherjee is known to be a fairly constitutionally aware and knowledgeable President. There was no reason for him to now feel a little awkward about the court questioning a decision passed by his office. The third and the most important thing is that politically, they seem to have been outmaneuvered because suddenly they have now started getting being painted as a party which is looking for an opportunity to dislodge governments. It's a perception Congress wanted to build for a while after what happened in Arunachal, and this judgment only reinforces that. And that's not the kind of defeat you want ahead of some assembly elections. Remember, Uttarakhand, as Rajdeep was pointing out, is going to assembly elections in next February, not very far off, and that's not the kind of PR you need just as you're heading into an election, Maha.
Javed, what is the Congress going to do now to ensure that 29th April, they see victory on the floor of the House? Are they in touch with their rebel MLAs? Are they in touch with anybody from the BJP? Because Randeep Surjewala refused to answer that question.
Well, I'm not surprised that he did. I would have been surprised if he revealed his strategy to the public. But yes, we can second guess them. First and foremost, if I were Harish Rawat, I would try and ensure that my flock remains intact. They claim that they have 34 MLAs, so he would ensure that he continues to enjoy the support of the independents, the 2 BSP MLAs, as also the rest of the Congress MLAs who are still with him. And thereafter go about saying if some of the rebel MLAs can be won back. Everything hinges on what the honorable courts decide vis-a-vis the fate of the 9 rebel MLAs on the 23rd. If they are disqualified, then it's over and done with. The game is over for the BJP. If they are not, and if they do vote, then there will be a big question. But also just remember, he's claiming that the Congress claims they have 34, and that they do not, in that 34, the Speaker's vote is not included. If there is a tie, the rules permit the Speaker to cast his vote, and his could be the deciding vote. The deciding vote.
All right, let's quickly listen into some more reactions that are coming in.
देखिए, हाई कोर्ट में जो फैसला है, उन्होंने कहा था कि विनियोग बिल पास नहीं हुआ है, उसमें भी हाई कोर्ट ने ये मान लिया है कि विनियोग बिल जो है वो पास है। दूसरा, जब आर्टिकल उन्होंने 356 लगाया था, उन्होंने राष्ट्रपति शासन को, उन्होंने कि राष्ट्रपति शासन भी लगना यहाँ पे गलत, वो कोर्ट ने साबित कर दिया है।
It is a victory of democracy. The way the central government, the Modi government, was toppling governments elected by the people, democratically elected governments. This is a big victory of democracy.
This is quite a historic thing, because this is the first time that a High Court has reviewed the imposition of President's rule and as a consequence set it aside. The centre assumes that there was a breakdown. The centre went on some material which was before it, either the governor's report or any other material, to come to the conclusion that President's rule could be imposed. Now, the material which the centre relied on was looked at by the Uttarakhand High Court, and the Uttarakhand High Court possibly has found that the material was insufficient.
Let me go back to Brijesh, who's joining us from Nainital. Brijesh, all means are used to keep the flock together. As Javed was pointing out even earlier, we had seen that some MLAs were packed off to a resort, and even in the past we've seen how they are kept in one particular hotel or resort so that there is no possible horse trading. Are we seeing those efforts already start from now?
Well, I think, this particular judgment will definitely give a huge boost to Harish Rawat camp. And what we are also getting to know is that the 9 rebel MLAs are also contemplating approaching Supreme Court now, because the judgment of the kind of...
बेदखल करना, दल बदल को प्रोत्साहन देना और साधनों का, पैसे का प्रयोग करना, संविधान का दुरुपयोग करना, ये तमाम बातें इस प्रकरण में सामने आई हैं और ये दुर्भाग्यपूर्ण है। ये बातें अदालत के सामने तो हैं, पर पहले जब 28 तारीख तय थी फ्लोर टेस्ट की, तो उसका सम्मान होना चाहिए था। इतवार के दिन यकायक एकदम से राष्ट्रपति शासन लागू करना, इसका मतलब आपके पास बहुमत नहीं था और आप बहुमत मैन्युफैक्चर करना चाहते थे, मैन्युफैक्चर भी गलत तरीकों से करना चाहते थे। तो ये इनकी कथनी और करनी में कितना बड़ा अंतर है, ये भी सामने आ गया है। और जहां तक हमारा प्रश्न है, ये राजनीतिक चुनौती है देश के सामने। सरकारें कैसे काम करेंगी, चुनी हुई सरकारें, अगर एक ऐसी नियत और ऐसी कार्यशैली केंद्र सरकार की हो, प्रधानमंत्री की हो, हम इसको संसद में भी उठाएंगे।
बीजेपी
All right, so there you have it, Anand Sharma saying that this matter is going to be raised in Parliament because what we are seeing here, according to the Congress party, is a political challenge, they are saying, which will make it impossible for state governments to function if there is always this threat of governments being toppled. Let me go across to consulting editor Rajdeep Sardesai for more. Rajdeep, clearly the line that the Congress party has already taken is the fact that there was a political challenge, and that is why they were fighting it out to save democracy, because and also to save the federal structure of the country. Now, is that how it's going to proceed, and try to take this matter up in Parliament as well?
3 or 4 points. Point number one, Maha, the fact is that what the Supreme Court has done has clearly, what the High Court has done is clearly a shot in the arm for the Congress party ahead of the second half of the budget session. They will use this to suggest that the BJP is trying to create a Congress Mukt Bharat by targeting Congress governments. Uttarakhand, there was talk of Manipur, there was talk about breaking MLAs in Maharashtra. So that will put the center on the defensive. However, whatever Anand Sharma may say, he cannot also get away from the fact that there were Congress MLAs who were disaffected, disenchanted, and who had switched sides. So there is also the fear that the Congress must have that why are its own MLAs so restive, particularly when elections in Uttarakhand are only months away. So there are two ways to look at it. One is the BJP and the central government has been put on notice by the courts that you cannot use the president's rule as a weapon to try and fish in troubled waters and try and bypass the constitutional system, which mandates in most instances that a floor test is necessary to decide on the majority of a government before a government is dismissed. And number two, I think there is a lesson also there for the Congress, because if the Congress believes as a result of this judgment, all its governments are protected, the fact is there are Congress governments where its MLAs are arrested. But I think the larger picture today clearly is that the Congress has received a constitutional shot in the arm. The Narendra Modi government has suffered its first major constitutional setback. And if there is any attempt in the future, particularly in states of the Northeast where this often happens, the government will have to think twice before using president's rule as a weapon. Remember, Maha, also there is a section of the BJP which is keen to get more Congress MLAs on its side in Uttarakhand and maybe even try and form a government. So I think that move also now will come under a question. Do you really want to form a government with jod tod ki rajniti? I think for the BJP, there is a lesson here, a salutary lesson that at the end of the day, you cannot use your power at the center in a manner to hold governments, state governments under some kind of a, the threat of dismissing them, particularly when the Prime Minister has been a former Chief Minister and often talks about federalism. So I think when you talk of cooperative federalism and then dismiss governments, then you are running a huge risk. So I think the government at the center has been put on notice, and I think the parliament session will reflect that.
Also, what kind of sentiment does it create? All right, Rajdeep, I'll come back to you in a bit. Subramaniam Swamy speaking at the moment. Let's listen in.
है कि नहीं, हमें देखने का हक है, तो यदि ये उसको पार करके चले गए, उसको देखना है. लेकिन मेरी राय है कि ये इसमें पहले से शुरू से बिल्कुल साफ था कि एक विकल्प सरकार बननी चाहिए. कांग्रेस वाले के लोग जो बाहर निकले, उन्होंने जाकर गवर्नर के सामने भी प्रदर्शन किया था. तो मैं समझता हूं कि हमारी जो अटॉर्नी जनरल हैं और सॉलिसिटर जनरल हैं, इनका जो तर्क है वो बिल्कुल फीका था और लगता था कि उन्होंने कुछ तैयारी भी नहीं की थी. तो मैं तो चाहता हूं कि नया अटॉर्नी जनरल और नया सॉलिसिटर जनरल को अपॉइंट करना चाहिए.
सर, क्या सरकार के लिए झटका है आपके लिए?
नहीं, सरकार के लिए कोई झटका नहीं है. ये तो कांग्रेस में 4-5 ऐसे उदाहरण हुए हैं. अब आपके अटॉर्नी जनरल और सॉलिसिटर जनरल अपना काम नहीं करते तो फिर आप बहस में कभी कोर्ट के सामने हारना पड़ता है.
सर, लेकिन विपक्ष ने इस पर घेरना शुरू कर दिया. आप वो तो बड़ी एम्बैरेसमेंट है आपके लिए.
हमारे लिए कोई एम्बैरेसमेंट नहीं है. एम्बैरेसमेंट तो कांग्रेस पार्टी के वही टूटे और उनके जो मुख्यमंत्री थे वो तो पैसा बांट रहे थे, वो स्टिंग ऑपरेशन में पकड़े गए थे. तो ये सारी बातें में हमने जो किया था वो सही किया था.
Legal luminary Soli Sarabji is now joining us on the phone line. Sir, the first question I'd like to ask you is that do you see this judgment talking more about how the president's approval for central rule in a state can also come under judicial review? Or do you see this as a clear reprimand for the central government, because the High Court has made some very stinging remarks how the center is creating chaos in states?
Nay, it is within the power of the High Court, in exercise of his function of judicial review, to go into the legalities of the president's rule. Now, I haven't seen the judgment. I don't know what grounds they've given for striking it down. Unless I see the judgment, I can't really comment on it. But except one thing to say, that High Court has the power, but the High Court's judgment is not the last word, and in all probability there will be an appeal filed in the Supreme Court, so let's await what happens in the Supreme Court. Appeal may be filed maybe tomorrow or by latest Monday.
Okay, so, sir, you know, but from the information that we're getting from the Uttarakhand High Court is that it has said, it has told the centre specifically that you are introducing chaos and undermining elected governments. It has also underlined the fact that the president decides on central rule in a state based on the cabinet's recommendation. So clearly, is this reprimand for the centre?
There, I want to see the exact language and the reasoning of the High Court.
Okay.
I don't want to comment at this stage. When I have the judgment or someone gives me a copy, I'll do so and you'll get back to me later, okay?
All right, Mr. Soli Sorabji, just stay on with us for a bit. Consulting editor Rajdeep Sardesai would like to ask you some questions.
I think the central question, Maha, which I would like to ask Mr. Sorabji is, does this order now set a precedent? Does it mean that in future now all president rule orders will be subject to judicial review? And to that extent, does the centre have to be extremely careful before it now pushes for president's rule in any state? Does he believe that this order, Mr. Sorabji, has set a precedent, and is it a healthy precedent? Or is it a precedent that could result in a confrontation between the different arms of the state in the future?
No, sorry, Rajdeep, I don't think the question is quite correct. That president's rule is subject to judicial review was laid down in Boma's case, no question about it. Now, what are the grounds for setting aside the president's rule? One has to wait for the judgment and examine the reasons given. Mere use of strong language is neither here nor there. Question is, the condition precedent for imposing president's rule is the breakdown of constitutional machinery.
But do you see a confrontation? Do you see a confrontation in the future, Mr. Sorabji, between the judiciary and the executive as a result of orders like this? Do you believe that lines are being blurred? You're saying it's an expanded concept of judicial review as defined in S.R. Bomai's case. There are those who believe that the Attorney General claimed that the judiciary could not review the orders of the president. So do you see potential in the future as a result of this Uttarakhand order for a clash between the judiciary and the executive?
Confrontation, really? The judgment of the High Court is not the final word. The matter will surely be taken up in the Supreme Court, and we'll have to see what the Supreme Court does. So where's the question of confrontation? The High Court has the power to decide one way or the other. In this case, it has decided against the government, accepted the Congress plea. That is subject to what happens in the Supreme Court. Confrontation आप press लोग बनाते हैं, कुछ होना नहीं चाहिए. One has to accept the judgment of the courts. And I'm sure the government.
Confrontation is being made by the media. We leave it there, Mr. Sorabji. I appreciate your joining us. I think it's very clear that this order can be challenged in the Supreme Court. Whether the BJP chooses to rule that or the central government chooses to rule that, we'll have to see. Because if, from what you said, 29th is the floor test. Now, the BJP could well take the stance if it really believes it has the numbers, and if it could break away even more Congress MLAs, as has been suggested by Kailash Vijayvargiya and a few BJP leaders, then maybe they will go for that floor test and try and defeat Mr. Rawat's government on the floor of the House. Because if you go and challenge to the Supreme Court, then are you pushing for some kind of a confrontation? So I think that decision will have to be weighed very carefully, whether you go to the Supreme Court, which is likely, or whether you first wait to see what happens on the 29th when that floor test takes place. Remember, Uttarakhand goes to the polls in February next year. So in 8 months' time, this issue will continue to reverberate. If the Congress government is defeated on the floor of the House. The Congress could well claim victim and make it an election issue. On the other hand, if the BJP wants to wait for 8 months, they could well do so if they actually believe there is anti-incumbency against the Harish Rawat government. So there's the political argument and there's the legal argument, and I think both will have to be weighed very carefully.
Rajdeep, let me also remind our viewers very quickly that another important date before the 29th of April will be the 23rd of April, when the case of the rebel Congress MLAs is going to be decided. Now, Rajdeep, today what the High Court has said is that the Congress MLAs have to pay the price of committing constitutional sin of defection by being disqualified. Now, this is what the High Court has said. Has it set the ground in many ways for what happens now on the 23rd as far as deciding the fate of the rebel Congress MLAs is concerned? Because that's going to be crucial for the Congress.
I don't think that it decides the fate. I think these are two separate orders. Obviously, it could have some bearing on that order, but I don't think it's final and decisive. But what is decisive is what is the fate of those rebels when it comes to counting their vote on the 29th? Because if the Speaker chooses not to count the vote of these rebel MLAs or does not allow them to participate in that floor test, then it is advantage Harish Rawat.
Yes.
If on the other hand, these rebel MLAs are allowed to participate in that floor test, then obviously the BJP will believe it can defeat Harish Rawat on the floor of the House. So you're absolutely right. What happens on the 23rd in that sense is critical, because it will decide the fate of the Harish Rawat government in the context of the floor test. I think the order in itself, if you look at it, is a pretty stinging one. It is a huge embarrassment for the central government. It's the kind of order which, if you remember last that I can recall, was when Bhutta Singh had imposed president's rule in Bihar, and it had led to a lot of embarrassment for the government at the time. Since then, I think this is the next such occasion where the government of the time has been embarrassed as a result of...
Rajdeep, I'll have to interrupt you there for a bit, because BJP is starting off with its press conference. Kailash Vijayvargiya speaking at the moment.
पर इस बात के लिए एक प्रश्नवाचक चिन्ह जरूर है हमारे दिमाग में कि एक ऐसे मुख्यमंत्री जो कि स्टिंग ऑपरेशन में सीधे सीधे दिखाई दिए, सारे देश ने देखा, उनको हाई कोर्ट ने रिलीफ दी है। पर हम बाकी चीजों का भी अध्ययन करेंगे, और आज भी हम कह रहे हैं कि हरीश रावत अल्पमत में है। 29 तारीख को भी ये सिद्ध होगा कि वो अल्पमत में ही है, इसलिए हमें कोई किसी बात का चिंता भी नहीं है। हम 29 तारीख को सिद्ध करेंगे कि वर्तमान हरीश रावत जी जो मुख्यमंत्री थे वो कल भी अल्पमत में थे, आज भी अल्पमत में, 29 तारीख को फ्लोर टेस्ट में सिद्ध हो जाएगा। नहीं, मुझे लगता है कि जिस पहले दिन से ही जिस प्रकार माननीय जज साहब के कमेंट्स जो पास हो रहे थे, लग रहा था कि इस प्रकार का निर्णय आएगा, इसलिए हमें कोई आश्चर्य नहीं।
All right, so a very short press conference there by Kailash Vijayvargiya, where he has not taken many questions, rather no questions at all, only saying that it doesn't come as a surprise to the BJP that this is the decision by the Uttarakhand High Court to set aside President's rule. Also saying that the BJP is confident that the Harish Rawat government will not be able to pass the floor test because they believe that Harish Rawat is in minority at the moment. Right, let me go back to consulting editor Rajdeep Sardesai. Rajdeep, you know, that was an extremely short press conference by Kailash Vijayvargiya. In fact, even if I heard it correctly, refused to take a question from a reporter who was asking him whether they'll go to the Supreme Court. Clearly, the BJP at this point hasn't consulted its legal team to really understand where to go from here on.
Well, that could be because the judgment has just come, but I think, as I said earlier, the BJP is going to weigh both the political and the legal option. The legal option is go to the Supreme Court, challenge the verdict. The political option, as Mr. Vijayvargiya pointed out, is that we still have a majority, they believe, and that we will prove it on the 29th on the floor of the House. So I think they're going to, once they know that if they're confident of having the majority, I think they will first wait to see what happens on the 29th and then take their next steps. But clearly the nature of the order is a setback, it's an embarrassment. And when you're embarrassed, then you keep your press conferences short. and don't answer the uncomfortable questions. Kailash Vijayvargiya is the kind of politician who never likes to take a step back, and therefore tried to keep the press conference as short as possible. He would not appear to be on the defensive. And I think the BJP, whether it likes it or not, has been given a bit of a wake-up call by the Uttarakhand High Court that you cannot resort in today's world with anti-defection laws to jod-tod ki rajniti in every instance. You succeeded in Arunachal, but you may not succeed in every instance. I think there is a message there for the central government.
Let me go back to... All right, we're getting news that after getting DNA samples, or rather giving the DNA samples of the 4 Pakistani terrorists killed in the Pathankot airbase attack, India is now contemplating disposing of the dead bodies lying...
There's the hair. But then I decided to use the public transport. And now I feel I look like Natha. But don't you worry, the show looks fantastic.